Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I thought I would do kind of a beginner-ish project, but it should involve a little bit of sawing and a little bit of soldering, and I think it might be a nice piece. So we're going to make a little turquoise ring, kind of a spoke pattern, and we'll see how it turns out. So let's get started. This is one of my design ideas sketchbooks that are available on my merch store. So if you check it out on my merch store, there's a number of different models, and this one has flow temperatures of various types of solder. Some of them have conversion charts. There's a new one with Mohs scale of hardness on it. But the real feature for me is the dot matrix on the pages, because it allows me to draw better pictures. And since I started the channel, I filled up through 4 or 5 of these, I think, with projects. So I have a record of all of the things that I've made, and I can go back and check it out if I ever want to revisit it. So I find that to be immensely useful at times. So get yourself a couple. It's nice to have good documentation. Alright, so I wanted to do something kind of simple. I picked out it's about a 10 by 13 turquoise. I'm not sure of the origins of this turquoise, so any of you turquoise experts can let me know. I was originally going to do something like this, where I had a kind of a recessed area and then 14 gauge square wire with cuts through it with a saw, just to give it some dimension. And I think I'm going to do it a little bit different. There'll still be a stone in the center. I'm going to solder it down to a piece of thicker sheet, and we'll cut it oval like that and then saw these slots in with the saw, try and get them as symmetrical as possible. That'll test my sawing skills today. And then we'll add a border made out of 14 gauge square wire and just kind of some kind of band. I haven't really decided what I like yet. Maybe something that kind of mirrors the angles, so we'll see. But that's my plan, and so let's start by making a bezel for this. And I'm going to use 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip in 26 gauge. That equates to 4.76 millimeters by 0.41 millimeters. 14 gauge square wire equates to 1.6 millimeters, and 18 gauge sheet, which we're going to use for the bottom, is 1 millimeter. So here's the bezel. Let's make ourselves a little bezel. If you're new to this, or new to my channel, here's some information about my torch setup and my flux and everything, types of solder that I use mostly. But see, this one's not going to be too complicated. We're going to make a bezel, so if you have a few bezels under your belt, this would be probably doable for you. We're going to solder. The thing that's going to make it a little challenging for a beginner is we're going to solder this little skinny bezel on top of a big piece of 18 gauge sheet, which has quite a bit more mass to it. And that's going to make it easier to get the bezel, or much easier to get the bezel up to the soldering temperature, but the sheet underneath it is going to take a little bit longer and more application of heat to get that there. So if you're new to this and you have a tendency to melt your bezel when you're soldering it down to a back plate, a lot of times that's because that bezel is sitting on top and it's really exposed to the heat, and you got all that mass down below, which is a little bit harder to get up to temperature. So changing the way you're applying the heat can sometimes take care of that situation. One way to do it is to get underneath the back plate with the heat from behind. That way the bezel is not exposed directly to the flame. And that's one option. You can do that by tilting it up or setting it across a gap, like Flying Chef does. He's one of my subscribers. Or you could use one of those little mesh tripods that a lot of people get. That allows you access to the bottom side with a torch. Okay, we'll get this snugged up as best we can. I always make a mark that's just about, I don't know, a millimeter beyond where they meet, 1/16 of an inch or 32nd of an inch, not very much. Just enough so I have some room to file without changing the size much. That's presupposing I cut it straight in the first place, which is not always a guarantee. Okay, this is something that I do that not everybody does, but I find it useful to make this into an angular shape, so it's easier to get those two ends pushing together in a nice clean way, as well as making a kind of a flat platform to put your piece of solder on so it doesn't keep falling off on you. That's not to say you can that you can't do it without doing this. That's okay too. Whatever floats your boat. Couldn't find my tweezers there. Now I'm just going to kind of shape it back into an oval shape. I do this for me, and this is not the only way to do it either, but I do it mostly by pinching out the sharp corners that I just created and gently putting some pressure to create a curve. If you do it this way, it's imperative that you don't squeeze very hard, because people have a tendency to try to take the pliers and wrench it sideways to bend something, and that usually overdoes it. So mostly what I'm doing is just kind of pinching. Let's slide it over the stone and see where we're at. We nailed the size, I think. We're pretty good on the size, so just need to do a little bit more shaping. You know, if you have one of those bezel mandrels, those are useful for this. If you even if it's not an oval one, if it's like a round one, you could shape it round on there first, and then it's easier to go from a round to an oval than just go straight into an oval, probably, from some sort of abstract shape. So that might help you to speed up the process. I've been doing it like this for so long, it's hard to break the habit, because you know, you learn one way and then you kind of do it that way forever. Hopefully dropping things that don't work as well. I've learned a lot along the way here over the YouTube channel, and changed quite a few of the things that I do based on suggestions or, you know, ideas presented to me by people in the comments that I just it never crossed my mind. So I think it's good. I think it's good to also watch other channels too. There's a lot of really good metalsmiths on YouTube, so check out some of the other ones. I always tell beginners that you should put whichever side looks nicer on your bezel, put that one down where you're going to solder it to the base. And that's because that's going to become the, you know, the profile of the bezel. The top part you can readjust as you get ready to set your stone, you know, just by bending it slightly or pinching it or whatever. Once it's soldered down, you can't change it, so you put your better side down. The question here is, do we want to make the square piece first, the square wire oval? I'm almost thinking we should do that so that we can get a gauge on how big of a piece of sheet we're going to need. And also, I think we can adjust the size more easily than, you know, once we make the oval and put it around here to see what we like. And then we can change the size. It's more easy to change the size at this stage, probably, if we don't like it the way it is. So let's get some square wire and do that first. So if I want to measure this just to get, that's square. Thought it was triangle wire for a minute. So you can use pi. Pi is a little bit more than 3, so pi times diameter equals circumference. You could actually measure here and measure here, add them together and divide by 2, and then multiply that times pi to get the pretty close to the exact circumference. But I'm just going to estimate because I'm going to size it up or down based on the way it looks. And so, you know, there's a little more than 3 that way, a little more than 3 that way, a little more than 3 that way. That should be adequate, I would think, because I was measuring on the long axis of the oval. So that was actually one of those things, I may have learned it when I was a kid. You know, I knew pi times diameter was a way to get the circumference of something circular. And I probably, like I said, probably learned to do an oval that way, the way I just told you, but I didn't remember it until somebody pointed that out, and I was like, oh, that makes sense. Alright, sometimes I'll use my flat nose pliers to grab square wire when I'm bending it, just because it's less likely to ding things up because it's got a little more surface area there. The other thing about square wire, when you go to bend it into a sharp angle or a sharp curve, it's going to try and turn on you, twist sideways, because it's trying to find an easier way to go, because this front side is compressing all of the metal into a smaller space. The back side is stretching that metal, you know, longer than it wants to go, so it tries to find an easier way to bend. And going diagonal seems to be easier for it. And so if you correct it as you go, like stop and flatten things out, you can kind of take care of a lot of that. This would probably look cool with a round stone too. I mean, I'm not even sure it's going to look cool after we do it with an oval stone, but if it does, I would imagine it'll look good with a round stone too. I don't think I want it quite that big. I want it to be a bold ring, but I don't want it to be, you know, just garish. That's one way to divide the human race, is people who like big jewelry and people who like dainty jewelry. And there's no better way, one way or the other, it's just a preference. I think that's close, but I want to go just a tiny bit smaller. I have a shirt that says there's 2 kinds of people. Those who can extrapolate things with incomplete information. And that's all it says. So if you get that joke, then you understand what extrapolation means. See, that's what happens when you're an English teacher for as long as I was. You appreciate word-related jokes. I'm actually kind of in the middle as far as delicate versus big on the size and boldness of jewelry. I do like big statement pieces, but I've seen some really delicate stuff that I really like too, so I think I lean towards the big and bold. I mean, as far as making jewelry, I don't really wear much jewelry myself. I'm not even sure why that is. I just never have. I love making jewelry. So it doesn't have to be perfectly oval right this moment. What we really care about is getting these 2 ends pushed together nicely and cleanly, so that when we go to solder them, you can't even tell where. There's really only one thing that can go wrong when you're soldering something like this. Well, that's not probably true, but there's one primary thing that goes wrong for people who are new, and that is uneven heating, because it's almost like there's 2 pieces being soldered together even though it's the same piece, because these are so far apart as far as the distance of the wire. Silver loses heat and gains heat very quickly, and in fact I think it loses heat and gains heat faster than any other metal, but don't quote me on that. So when you're heating over here, this side's cooling off. When you're heating over here, this side's cooling off. So a lot of times people will not get both sides to reach that soldering temperature at the same time, which in the case of hard silver sheet solder is about 1450 degrees. And if that happens, the solder is going to jump to whichever side is hot enough for it to stick to. So that's why people a lot of times have the solder jump to one side, is because that side reached temperature before the other side did. If you get it to reach temperature at about the same time, it usually just kind of pools right over that spot and works its way into the seam in between there. So keep that in mind when you're heating, and that way you try and get it to reach that temperature at the same time there. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're new and you're struggling with things melting or you're having trouble soldering stuff, give it a little time. You will get it. But specifically, you'll do better if you pay attention when things do go south, by trying to figure out what happened, you know. And it usually has to do with heating unevenly or something like that. So we're going to try and get this to reach temperature at about the same time. We'll see if I succeed. See, now actually, I didn't do a great job. This side reached temperature before this side did, so it flowed along there. Now I can fix that pretty easily. We'll just add another little piece of solder across the gap, and I'll try and heat it a little bit more evenly. There we go. I'd like to say I did that on purpose as an educational tool, but I did not. Okay, first, let's get this a little bit cleaned up. Once I get this pretty, at least symmetrical to my eye, which means after I solder it all together, I'll look at it and be like, that's not quite straight, or that's a little crooked, which is the story of my life. Once I do that, I'll probably clean up the inside with an abrasive silicone rotary tool bit. If you're like me, sometimes you get something almost right and you keep messing with it and it keeps getting worse. I hate when that happens. I'm just kind of looking to see where the bends don't look quite right to me. I'm making a tiny bit of adjustment. I think that's pretty good. Well, I'm going to get it as flat as I can and then smooth it out with the rotary tool, and then I'll be right back. You can see on the inside edge I just kind of smoothed out all the tool marks that I left in there, so it looks pretty nice. And I just filed the outside edge. I didn't use the rotary tool on the outside edge, so but that's pretty good, I think. So I was thinking one of the variations you could do if you're doing something like this as a project is sometimes having a different proportions of the oval, like a longer, skinnier oval on the outside and a shorter, squatter oval on the inside, or vice versa. Sometimes gives it kind of a nice look. And let's cut a piece off this 18 gauge. This is a small piece of my dear, very expensive anymore, thick sheet. You could probably do this with 22 or something like that if you wanted to. If you get much thinner than that, I don't think it would be as good, because I think that's just a bit too flimsy. So I really need this only to go to the inner edge of this circle or oval, so I can conserve a little bit that way. See, I have it sitting over the edge and over the edge over here, so that should still give me plenty. If you're going to be in the Greeley area this weekend, I'll be doing the Greeley Arts Picnic show. It's on Saturday and Sunday, downtown Greeley, so you should come stop by and say hello. purchase some of my jewelry. That's if you're watching this in July of 2026. So in the future, it may be too late. Okay, here's what I think we should do. I'm going to scribe a line from corner to corner to get it relatively close to the center. Then I can use that as a guide where to place the bezel on here. So I can try and get that as centered as I can. And then after that, we can lay this over the top of it and use that, maybe tape it down or something so we can scribe a line on the inside to know exactly how to cut this out. I'm going to dry that without moving it too much. Sometimes when you get it to boil, it'll shove things around a little bit. Okay, let's put these pieces of solder in here. Some people cut really tiny pieces of solder and line the whole inside with like 30 of them. I never really thought that was necessary when you can do it with, 6 bigger ones or whatever. No sense making yourself crazy trying to get all 30 of those in position. And it is inside of the bezel, so any kind of mess that you might leave in there, it's going to be covered up. Yeah, the cheek is hot, and the bezel is still getting hot just by contact, but the flame wasn't directly on the bezel. So once it's really, the whole thing is hot, then you can just kind of flip it back down and get it to flow. So let's see how we did. Okay, so I'm going to let that clean up in the pickle for a little bit, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so I had a little mini epiphany, and I decided to super glue this down to hold it in place while I scratched it with a little T-pin on the inside edge here. That way I'll know where to cut. I'll cut it just a little bit outside of that with the saw, and then we can file it till it fits in there perfectly. And that popped right back off. That's not a big deal. Cool. I had another thought too while I was waiting for this to clean up a little bit. I thought it might be nice to have a triple band, like 3 parallel square wires like this that just go all the way around. So I think I might do that instead of this. I don't love that. That's okay, but that's kind of generic. This is more modern maybe. So I like to do turquoise sometimes in a less traditional turquoise setting just because it's different, So, all right, so let's go saw this out. I keep saying I need to make myself a new bench pin, but I never get around to it. Okay. This is a 00 on here. Okay, now I'm just going to take the file and smooth that out until it's about the right size. Then we're going to mark off where we're going to make our little notches in here and cut them in with the saw. That fits in there pretty good. Okay, I think while it's in here, it might be easier to mark where we want those notches. This little center finder might help us a little bit. Well, let's pop that off and see how it looks. I guess we'll just go saw those out and see how it ends up, right? We'll just have to see how my sawing skills are tonight. Trying to get them as symmetrical as possible. I'm not succeeding 100%. That's pretty good for me. I'm not terribly good at sawing, so I'm always pleased when it comes out looking relatively symmetrical. So let's put that together and see how it looks. Okay, I'm kind of liking the way that looks, actually. So I like also that it's got a slightly different height. So the inside part is slightly lower than the outside part. I'm going to try and maintain that when I solder these. So here's my thinking. You could flux everything and set it on a bunch of pieces of solder so it's touching both the bottom of the that bezel sheet and the back of the 14 gauge square wire. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to pick solder. This is not probably necessarily a beginning skill, an intermediate skill, where it takes you from being a beginner to an intermediate maybe. It allows you to place little bits of solder right where you want them to go. And for me, I think this is going to be easiest to do it this way. So on pick soldering, we get the whole thing up to the right soldering temperature after we've picked up a piece of the solder and balled it up on the tip. And when we think the soldering or the piece of metal is at the right temperature, we'll move it in there and touch it. And it should be at the flow temperature of the solder for it to jump on there. But if you want to see the full video about it, I'll put a link right up there for you. See, on both of those I jumped the gun a little bit, but I was using those to gauge when I was close to the right soldering temperature. Pretty sure I got them all. Let's cool it off and take a look at it. That looks pretty nice. I like it. Okay, should we make a band? This, I thought, just line them up like this and use a couple of little pieces of square wire to solder them together, and then cut that out after it's attached to the ring. Of course, you could make this whatever size you wanted it to be. I kind of picked about a 7.5 on this one, I think. Okay, that's pretty good. So let's kind of down near the end of the mandrel here. Let's bend this around. I tend to go back and forth when I'm bending them like this, because since the mandrel is tapered a little bit, I get a little bit nicer result. So basically I'm just trying to get these as parallel as I can. I'm going to want to get these to be kind of flat on top, so I'm going to spend some time filing like this. You know what you could do in this situation, probably. That's 12, I think. Where is that? No? Let's put a couple of pieces of 14 in here to keep these parallel to each other. That'll make me get a better. That's 16. Alright, that sits pretty well. Now, the big key is getting it soldered on here without putting it on crooked. So we get it pointed at those two marks. That should be okay. I think I'm going to push this into a magnesia block, though, which is a softer surface. That way I don't have any chance of anything falling off of here, or less of a chance anyway. That's not too bad. Let's. I'm going to use some a different temperature solder for this, since I soldered these together. I want them to not move. Oh, you moved on me. Part of this mass at the bottom is also buried in the pad, and that acts as an insulator, and we really want to get that and the other one up to temperature, so you gotta heat it accordingly. What I really care about is that all 6 of these ends are attached. And then we'll look at seals. That's not bad. Sometimes I hit it, sometimes I don't. Alright, the last thing I'm going to do is just cut out those little pieces there and then throw it in the pickle. So I'll be back and we'll set the stone. So I got things polished up and we're ready to set the stone. I put a little bit of pressed cardboard under there. I use the backs of legal pads usually just to raise it to the correct level. I do this a little differently than some. I use my side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. I'll just push it right up against the edge there. For a lot of people when they first start, it's helpful, especially if you don't have strong hands, to find a way to secure your ring when you're setting the stone. There's a number of different tools to do that. You can use a vise, you can use one of those ring vices that are made out of wood, which are kind of handy. Once I have the bezel pushed down, I'm going to burnish it with this outer smooth part of the chain nose. And that just means putting some decent pressure on the top edge there, kind of rubbing it right where it goes up against the stone. You want to put a lot of pressure on it, but you don't want to slip and scratch your stone. That's pretty good. So, kind of see, this is what I had in mind, except for I changed the band on it a little bit, just for something different. I kind of like the way it's more kind of spokey or radial, and the three lines with spaces between it kind of matches. So overall, I think that's a success. I like that one. Lots of variations you could do. Curious to hear how you might have done it differently if you were to try and do this one. Again, this one probably, if you did a simpler band on it, is maybe a beginning piece. I don't know. It's somewhere in the line between beginning and intermediate, I think. But you tell me what you think. There's not a huge amount of technical skills. It's just a lot of steps. So let me know what you think, and I'll get some better pictures. Okay, well that was a turquoise radiating ring, or whatever you want to call it. I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, I would love it if you'd hit the like button before you go. That really helps to get my channel promoted. I also appreciate it when people go check out my main channel page. I have 660 plus videos now. I've been doing 3 per week for about 4.5 years. And so there's a lot of content over there, and I think you might find something else interesting. So check it out and watch a few. And before you leave, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. It doesn't cost anything, and it makes it much easier to find my content, so also helps me out. Before we go, I wanted to thank a couple of groups of people. First are my patrons over on Patreon. They are a great group of people who are helping me financially, but also have created this lovely environment over there, which I like interacting with. And we have a new one, Jim K. Thank you for signing up. I think you'll find that it's a really cool group of people over there, and I hope you enjoy getting to know them. So the other group are my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 29,300, which is amazing. Thank you for that. I look forward to 30,000 soon, so tell your friends. I really appreciate the comment section on YouTube. I get the most kind advice and suggestions for videos, and I really appreciate learning how other people do things, because I'm mostly self-taught, and it's always good to get people who have a little bit more schooling about their silversmithing behind it. So thanks for that information. I do appreciate it. I also appreciate the financial help, the buy me a coffees, the super thanks, the merch purchases, and buying my ebooks. All of that stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I could not do that without your help, so thank you. The video description down below has some important links. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to find out more about that nice community over there. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself a nice design idea sketchbook, some other merch. There's quite a few other things on that, so check it out and get yourself a present. And finally, there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's tutorials. It has a page for each of the videos that I did in 2025 with a link to the video, as well as a lot of additional information, including like pictures and things that I thought about after the fact, a list of materials, stone information, difficulty rating, all of that stuff. So there's a bountiful bunch of tutorials there many projects, and it's a really nice way to support my channel. So get yourself one of those, or even get all three of them. I've done it for 3 years now, 2023, 2024, and 2025. If you look on the merch store, you'll find a link to where you can get all three of them for a discount. So get yourself 3. All right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.